in my personal opinion, the Corso paper was so poorly done from an academic perspective on a area of healthcare that is well known and well versed. What they did is that they designed this study to make what I would call a preconceived conclusion.
I just got done an interview with Dr. Deed Harrison. We went over his paper, him and his colleagues' paper, together with ICA, the Radiophobia overreaction paper in response to the Corso paper. So this was a paper to as a rebuttal to the paper that pretty much said X-ray guidance for chiropractic techniques like upper cervical and other full spine chiropractic techniques, there's pretty much no evidence and there's no value, and that the recommendation was to not take X-rays as chiropractors. It was a fantastic conversation. He is the president of Chiropractic Biophysics, president and CEO. He is publisher of over 200 peer-reviewed papers. He's co-authored textbooks, like over 7 textbooks. He's just a plethora of information. His curriculum vitae is too long to state here. And the reason I have him on the Upper Cervical Chiropractic Research Show is because his technique really focuses on X-ray to guide patient care. And as upper cervical chiropractors, we definitely do that. And chiropractic biophysics, his technique, full spine, along with other full spine techniques, use chiropractic as well. So we are definitely on the same page, and we know the value of those X-rays to guide treatment. And so I wanted to have him on as one of the authors of this paper to really go through and give us his perspective on everything. So he gives us a history of what's happened prior to this paper. He gives us his insight. Very humble man, just a great guy. I really had a good time interviewing him and listening to all of his knowledge, and I was super happy to have him on. So really hope you enjoy the show. Make sure you like and comment and do all that stuff to get the video boosted and well known, so that more people can see this episode and see the importance of what's going on. So I hope you enjoy. Again. Okay, welcome back everyone to the Upper Cervical Chiropractic Research Show. This is episode 31B. On behalf of the Council on Upper Cervical Chiropractic Care, I'm Dr. Kevin Leach, and here with me today is a very special guest, Dr. Deed Harrison. Thanks for coming on, Doc. We have some very important things to discuss here today.
Yeah, I'm honored to be on, Dr. Kevin. Really appreciate you reaching out to me and giving me the opportunity to come on your podcast.
Absolutely. Well, Doc, you've done a tremendous amount for this profession in regards to research and everything. So I just want to thank you for everything that you've done, all of your hard work and everything that you're doing for the profession.
Hey, I totally appreciate that. And just real quick, for people that don't know me, I started out as a clinician, not a researcher, and that was my true love and passion. But it just snowballed into me being a researcher and an education now in the profession. And I'm a small part of a big team. And, you know, a lot of times I get to be the face and the name, but I have an amazing group of chiropractors and other researchers, PTs, PhDs behind me and beside me that really are responsible for a lot of the work that I get to do.
Great. Thank you so much. Well, the paper that we're reviewing today is titled Radiophobia Overreaction. College of Chiropractors of British Columbia revoke full X-ray rights based on flawed study and radiation fear-mongering. And this is published in Dose Response in an international journal. And this is by Oakley, Betts, you, Dr. Harrison, Siskin, Hirsch, and the International Chiropractors Association Rapid Response Research Review Subcommittee. And this was done in response to the paper, quote, The Clinical Utility of Routine Spinal Radiographs by Chiropractors, a rapid review of the literature. This is an episode Dr. Evans and I did for episode 30, but your paper is in response to this. So Doc, before we get into more of the details of really a lot of the bullet points of what you're refuting here with this paper, Can you talk about how this came across your desk and just the events leading to this paper and everything behind that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm smiling because a lot of people don't realize the background behind this. This has been going on for 2 or more decades. So, I mean, in a nutshell, and just stop me if I don't elaborate enough or if I go too much. But the reality of it is, this has been going on since the 1990s, where there became a movement to try to restrict or eliminate chiropractic routine radiation rights for subluxation assessment. And I don't claim to understand the rationale of why and how, and that's a totally different conversation of why somebody would want to do that. And we can paint our own story, but the reality of it is this started in 1998 and 1999,
Mm.
on some papers that my late father, Dr. Don Harrison, and I and our other colleagues at the time, we wrote in JMPT, and it was about the use of X-ray for subluxation analysis in chiropractic. And then Dr. Mitch Haas, Haas, from Western States Chiropractic College, and a couple other colleagues basically took exception to that paper, and wrote not a letter to the editor, but wrote a critical commentary of our paper. And that was published in 1999 in JMPT. And, I won't give the full references. You can track it down. I can give you a website where you can look at all my work. But that critical commentary was then published in 1999. Well, then our group, led by my late father and myself, we then rebutted that paper with not a letter to the editor, but a true commentary exchange. And this was done in JMPT. And, at the time, we didn't realize how important these papers were going to be until we saw the snowball effect. So we would write something, and then they being chiropractic academics, would write a critical rebuttal. And this went on for a long time until roughly 2008, when new red flag guidelines came out in the chiropractic profession in JMPT. And this was led by Dr. Andre Bucieres, Dr. Cynthia Peterson, Dr. John Taylor, and they were from different chiropractic academic areas in Canada and the United States. And this 2008 chiropractic red flag guideline was really meant to restrict and limit chiropractic X-ray utilization, similar to medical practice, standard medical practice. And I don't mean surgery, I mean standard medical practice, where it's red flag only. And, we know what red flag means. It's, fracture, tumor, infection, some kind of, major recent trauma, not minor.
Right.
And it's only, we're only supposed to use X-ray if somebody's not responding to our care in 4 to 6 weeks, and on and on. And these X-ray guidelines, these red flag guidelines, they really limit and restrict what chiropractors can do, and quite frankly, what we want to actually assess to refer out, et cetera, if we're going to be doing that. But the reality of it is these were published in 2008 in JMPT, and it really was condemning to chiropractors that take routine X-rays, whether or not you're upper cervical based, Pierce technique, Gonstead practitioners, Pettibon practitioners, CBP practitioners. We all take X-ray for red flag, but that's not the main reason we do it, right?
Right.
And so my group then initiated a response to these red flag only guidelines. I'm laughing because I nominated myself as the chair of a subluxation X-ray guideline for the profession. I just said, "Hey, Deed, do you want to be the chair?" And I said, "Yeah, Deed, I want to be the chair." So then we started this subluxation based guideline, and we got several organizations, including the ICA, to adopt and endorse them. And it wasn't just me on them. I had, Christopher Kent was on there. My late father was on there. Dr. Jill Betts was on there. We had, 20 or 30 authors were not only clinicians, but academicians in the profession. And so at the time we thought, well, that's better that, guidelines are written by clinicians and researchers for the profession. So that came out in 2009. And then, of course, that was attacked. And even though they were legitimate guidelines, it was actually a whole textbook. And then it seemed like since that time, about every 2 years, something bad happened. And then I'm almost done with the history, but in 2008 and 2009, about the same time, this group, I don't know why it was spearheaded by these people, but I'm pretty sure they were asked to do it. Dr. Christensen and Dr. Hartwigsen from over in Europe, in the UK, they wrote a paper in JMPT that was the first systematic literature review on sagittal plane alignment of the spine in chiropractic and health and disease. And of interest, they concluded that there was zero evidence that the sagittal plane alignment of the entire spine affected anything in patient outcomes. And we read that and we were like, how could you make that conclusion, right?
Yeah.
And so this was a systematic literature review, which was, the second tier research evidence that's available below a meta-analysis, right?
Right.
So we wrote a letter to the editor, or not a letter to the editor. We wrote a critical review of that and submitted it to JMPT. Well, JMPT decided that it was, I think, too damning of that paper, because we showed that they missed the vast majority of evidence on the topic. In fact, 77 papers. And of those 77, 74 of them contradicted their conclusion. And so JMPT wouldn't take that critical commentary. They said it had to be a letter to the editor. And at the time, I knew the editor from research work, and I said, it can't be a letter to the editor because you can't show the limitations of this paper. And it was being used in chiropractic guidelines that were being developed called the CCGPP guidelines. I don't know if you remember those.
Yeah.
They kind of lost traction, but it was guidelines written for the insurance industry to limit chiropractic care to 2 to 4 weeks. And so JMPT wouldn't take our rebuttal. So we sent it to Dr. Matt McCoy's team in the JBSR at the time. And Dr. McCoy said, hey, this is an amazing paper, sent it out to review. He said, one problem, why didn't you send it to JMPT? And we wrote back and we saved everything. We said, well, they didn't want it because they wanted it as a letter to the editor, and we can't do it as a letter to the editor because of the impact of this paper. And Matt said, well, send me that information so I can see it. And there's a reason I'm bringing this up, because there's this paper in dose response is not in the same journal as the Cote paper or the Corso paper. So journals don't like that. They like the letter to the editor, or they like exchanges in their own journal. Well, for whatever reason, JMPT decided not to take that. We sent it to Matt McCoy's journal. We ripped this 2008, 2009 paper, showed the huge flaws. Then what happened is a couple more papers come out that are not really important, but then in 2018, one came out that was hugely important, the Jenkins paper. Jenkins et al. Out of Australia and Canada, similar to this paper that you want to actually talk to me about. The Jenkins paper came out in Chiropractic and Manual Therapies, the same journal that the Corso paper came out in that we're here to talk about. Well, the Jenkins paper was seriously flawed too, and it was not a systematic literature review like the 2008 paper that I just brought up. It was what was called basically a commentary review, if you will. And a commentary review is more like an opinion piece. So it's the lowest level of evidence. It's level 5, but yet this was published as if it was a systematic literature review. Now the journal would argue that it wasn't. They would say, no, it was just a critical review. But the way it was presented and interpreted by the academic community was that this was another systematic literature review, which in fact, it was nothing more than an opinion piece. And so as a researcher, to me, I just go, well, an opinion piece, who cares? You toss it aside. But it got a lot of traction, and it made like reviews at different academic research organizations in chiropractic. And some of the colleges were then using this to limit x-ray rights or restrict x-ray rights from the students and changing their educational policies. So we sent a letter to the editor to Chiropractic and Manual Therapies to critique the Jenkins paper. And I've got all this documented, like truly, I save everything.
Yeah.
And my letter to the editor, my colleagues and I, Dr. Paul Oakley and myself and Dr. Joe Betts, our letters were denied at Chiropractic and Chiropractic Manual Therapies. They didn't want the debate. It's pretty clear they didn't want the debate. They tried to basically say our letters weren't of value, didn't have scientific merit. And I'm like, look, man, I've done 200 peer-reviewed papers. I've written 60 letters to the editor in different top journals. I know how to critique a paper.
Right.
I'm not new at this.
Yeah.
So anyway, we ended up critiquing the Jenkins paper in two places, in Dose Response, and then again in Dr. Matt McCoy's journal. And Dr. Matt McCoy again said, why did you send it to our journal? Why didn't you send it to Chiropractic and Manual Therapies? So we sent him the whole paper trail, and we shred the Jenkins paper. We show basically how twisted it was. And, I hate the word, but I'm going to use it. It's an agenda. Yeah. And it's a personal opinion driven by an agenda, right? Yeah. And so that leads us now to the Corso paper that you want to talk about. Yeah. This is the next one in the chain. It just seems like every couple of years they do this. Yeah. And then they commission a different group of very, very well-known and well-respected academics in chiropractic. And this time the Corso paper that came out in Chiropractic and Manual Therapies again. So we expected it, but you don't know when it's going to come out, but it comes out, it hits our desk. And the bad thing, Kevin, is for me, the whole, clinical x-ray side of the profession looks at me and my team as the sheriffs of this. And so we get sent the paper, and we've already, at this time we've already seen it, but I think over 40 people sent it to me and basically said, what are you going to do? And
which is a blessing and a curse, right? Because it means like you're the authority on it, but then you got a little bit more responsibility maybe.
Right. And, you have to read the paper in detail, and you have to see, is it legitimate? Yeah. And then if there's a critique, we try to send that critique to, again, Chiropractic Manual Therapies. Guess what they did? They denied the paper. We sent, our team collectively sent 3 different letters to the editor, and they were all rejected, saying that they were of little value, flawed scientific merit, blah, blah, blah. And, we save all this, and I'm wordsmithing it. And if somebody listens to this and the journal goes, that's not true, I'm happy to share with anybody the rejection letters. And they're, number one, letters to the editor. It's a critique by an expert in the field that paper was originally done. Right. And your letter, it's typically just read by the editorial review board, and they go, wow, there's some good points in there. A letter to the editor does not get sent out for peer review. It doesn't get critiqued by a scientific panel like a paper does. Okay. Well, Chiropractic Manual Therapies decided they needed a paper trail, a reason to reject our letters to the editor. So they sent it to 3 to 5 reviewers on the letters. And it's just ridiculous. If you know anything about research, you would go, nobody critiques a letter to the editor. That's for the authors of the paper to rebut the critique if they can. Yeah. And so then what we ended up doing is we said, well, let's see if we can write a very large review of this and send it to Dose Response. And it's very cool that Dose Response accepted this exchange, because it's typically not supposed to be done in a different journal. It's supposed to be done in the original journal that the paper was published. But we have to show that, hey, there's something going on here to restrict and eliminate x-ray in chiropractic. And dose response is actually the best journal for this, because they're about toxicology of anything in the environment, whether it's, radiation, health physics, whether it's, other environmental toxins, whatever. This is where the debate should occur. And the editorial board of Dose Response is very open and very favorable to academic critique. They want the debate to happen. They don't want to shut it down.
That's great.
Which is hats off to them. It's a really top tier journal, and I think they've done right by the scientific community and the chiropractic community at large by publishing these. So that's the history. I know that's maybe a mouthful, but
hey,
again, 2 decades.
It's important, and for people, I mean, that's what my whole goal for this podcast is to get information out about the research and support the chiropractic profession, especially doing techniques that we do that are guided by radiography. So I think it's super important. Dr. Tyler Evans and I just reviewed this paper that you did, your rebuttal here, and it's so well done and thorough. And again, I think you said demolishes, like you just said about the Jenkins paper. I mean, it's so thorough. Did you have any sort of different goal for this paper compared to the other ones that you've done in the past, to really just kind of to slam it home and just to really get everything out there in a condensed and thorough manner to really put this, put that other paper to sleep?
Yeah, essentially that's a great statement, Kevin. With our team, you got to realize we've been intimately, working with this for 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
And so we know the ins and outs of this exchange and the debate. So we were like, we do need to put the quote unquote the nail in the coffin if possible.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the interesting thing, this Corso paper was tied to the British Columbia Chiropractic College revoking full X-ray rights in British Columbia. Yeah. And so it became, twofold. It became bigger than just the Corso paper. This became the ability of chiropractors in British Columbia to maintain a legal practice that they've been doing for 87 years.
Right.
So, there's a behind the scenes thing going on here where, the Corso paper, they say, oh, we didn't get paid for it. Well, that's not really true. The British Columbia College donated member money, $150,000 to Ontario Tech, where Professor Cote works. And so, you read between the lines, and these are all things that are in the minutes of the board meeting. This is not conspiracy agenda. Right. We track all this down.
Right.
And so you got to realize that this was quote unquote, maybe a subtly paid for type of thing. And the Corso paper, there were so many flaws with it. When we read it, we were like, you can't actually do this in a letter to the editor, even though we tried.
Yeah.
So it's a good thing that Chiropractic and Manual Therapies rejected it, because we were able to put up this huge critical review of the Corso et al. Paper, and then discuss the British Columbia Chiropractic College with what they did. And it's a terrible thing that what they did. And there's some legal things going on in Canada right now involving all these papers.
Yep. So Doc, I asked Dr. Evans this when we reviewed this as well. I can't seem to really grasp or understand what their agenda is, of why they're circling the wagons in on their own and trying to get rid of these, the chiropractors that are really doing the chiropractic work that have been around for decades. Like, what is their goal? What are they trying to do? What is their end game? And why are they so convinced that we shouldn't be taking x-rays?
Yeah, that's a great question. And this is where I'm totally giving you my opinion.
Of course.
But, I've thought about it too. And there's a few possibilities, and they're probably all linked together. And I don't know which one is more or less, but always when you see things like this, there's money at hand, there's power at hand, there's control at hand.
Yeah.
And then there's academic agendas, the way they want to see the chiropractic profession go. There's money behind the scenes in every profession. And whether this is insurance money, whether it's trying to restrict chiropractic practice, or maybe it's as simple as they actually believe
Yeah.
that there's no value to subluxation assessment and correction on the x-ray.
Mm,
So all of those are possible. I don't know which one of those is the strongest influence. And there's got to be, for this to be as big as it is, and it's not just one person, this is a whole group of people that continue to do the same thing. It is in the collegiate education level, and it's in the academic research circles, and some of it, maybe it is a misunderstanding of what chiropractors like yourself as an upper cervical doctor, why we actually take x-rays, what we do, what we look at it, and how we change our intervention and
right.
how that changes outcomes.
Yeah.
Some of these people weren't trained in the same way we were trained.
Yeah. And told probably a lot of things against even the word subluxation and a lot of the history of chiropractic, and hate the history of chiropractic and don't really have that respect for it like we do.
Yep. And it's kind of a shame, because just because you're not trained in the same manner doesn't mean there's not somebody that intimately understands that and has a very, very large scale of knowledge in that area.
Yeah.
It's like for me in particularly, spine biomechanics is my background, and it's very well documented in the scientific literature that I'm pretty versed in understanding spine displacements, what they do, and how radiation and radiography assessment affects and alters what we do. And for somebody to come along and overtly, like the Corso paper said, that there's no evidence, not conflicting evidence. They
Right.
said there's no
No
evidence.
evidence. Yeah.
It's like, okay, there's
Yeah.
got to be a little bit of an agenda,
Yeah.
just a little bit of an agenda, because you can't say that. And the way,
Right.
we want to talk about this paper a little bit, the way they designed this, they did it strategically to be able to remove any of the controversy.
Yeah.
And when you do the things they did, like for example, they didn't review any of my personal work from the year 2005 onward. So the earliest paper of mine that most recent one was 2005 that they included. And I'm like, you know what? I've done a ton in the last 15 years. How is it that none of my group's papers made the grade? And the way they wordsmithed it was very carefully done and concisely done to be able to make sure that they couldn't or didn't have to include my papers, my team and I. So they just said, if the treatment wasn't performed by a chiropractor, we won't include it.
Yeah.
Which is okay. So
Yeah.
there's things in all of healthcare that we do as doctors that were not really designed by a chiropractor.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Absolutely.
many of the exam procedures that we do, those are
Of
just
course.
standardized
Yeah.
exams.
Yeah.
A chiropractor didn't make it up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So then according to the way they wordsmith this is, you should not be allowed to do anything as a chiropractor
Right.
unless the research was done by a
By
chiropractor.
chiropractor. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy,
It is
right?
crazy. It is crazy. Well, and you actually led right into what I was going to ask you about next, as far as just the main flaws of the Corso paper, and one of them being their inclusion criteria, right? So
Yep.
do you want to talk a little bit about that? And I mean, it was that their justification of why your papers weren't in there, and why the non-chiropractic papers weren't in there, and what I think it was 150 or more papers that you guys quoted in here that should have been included, even
Yep.
according to their own inclusion criteria. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a big read, this rebuttal that we did in August of 2021 in dose response. And I recommend that everybody that's interested
Read
in
it.
this exchange, they should read both papers.
Absolutely.
And they should not just read my colleagues in my papers that we did on behalf of the ICA committee. And before, I need to acknowledge, the co-authors again. You did, but again, this is a whole team, and we're working with the ICA Rapid Response Research Committee in this particular case, and that committee it's set forth with people like myself to respond to very urgent situations in the academic profession in chiropractic. But when we read this paper by Corso et al., if you're not an academic or a researcher, sometimes you don't realize the flaws. Well, first and foremost, you look at it the way the trial was originally registered. It was registered to be done as a systematic literature review. And so if you look up the history of the trial, and not all reviews have to be registered. Usually it's only a prospective clinical trial that needs to be registered, but you should also register systematic reviews and meta-analyses if possible. And it lets people know what's going to be coming up in the next, year to 2 years, whatever. Well, the way the trial was registered was as a systematic literature review, but then the way it came out was a rapid literature review, right, which is entirely different. Right. Okay, so the reader or the listener here as a clinician, they go, well, what's the difference, Deed? Well, a systematic literature review is designed to process all the data or the best data on a topic in healthcare, for example, that clinicians have been doing for a long, long time. And we want to try to improve what the clinical understanding of that is and see if we can, kind of concisely take that data and go, here's the best treatment for this, and here's the best outcomes. And it's meant to improve not just academics, but clinicians' understanding of this area and what to do, when to do it, how to do it, et cetera. Right. So that's a systematic literature review. Rapid literature reviews are very different. For example, when everybody can take this analogy, when COVID hit, COVID was a brand new disease, whether or not you buy into it or not, it truly brand new disease triggered by the SARS-CoV-2 virus. We didn't know anything about it, and we being healthcare. You don't know anything about this, so you have to have a rapid response, and you have to start doing quick studies and try to do background studies and do review studies and retrospective and prospective. And then as soon as that data becomes available, somebody's got to put it together and synthesize it and go, this is an early review of our understanding of this epidemic. So that's when a rapid review is done. So you think about this in X-ray. Chiropractors have been doing X-ray for, a century, or more. Yeah. In Canada, it's been 87 years. You don't do a rapid literature review for a procedure that has relatively few complaints and has long-standing usage in a profession like chiropractic and X-ray. You don't commission a rapid literature review. So number one, that's the red flag. It's like, okay, what's going on here? Yeah. And a rapid literature review takes shortcuts and on. For example, a systematic literature review averages roughly about 1,100 to 1,500 man hours or human hours. That's a lot of work. Yeah. A rapid literature review is nowhere near that much work. And what you can do with these rapid reviews, there's supposed to be criteria that you follow, but you can cheat and you can kind of go, I'm only going to do this, I'm only going to do that, we're not going to do this. Yep. And that's what was done. And that's where Corso et al. Said, oh, we're only going to allow papers done by chiropractors as the treatment. So if a chiropractic author was on there, even though I didn't administer the intervention, it doesn't count, right?
Yeah, which is crazy. It's crazy because that's not what's being questioned.
Right, that's correct. It's like, is there evidence for X-ray to A, be of value in the chiropractic care, and B, change intervention, right? And then C, does it change outcome? Right. And there's a lot of problems with this thing. Number one, the rapid literature review, but the omission of just my team's randomized trials. If they would have included even 2 of the randomized trials, and we've done 13 of them, their entire paper would have said something totally different than what it did say. Yeah. So they knew they had to make sure they didn't include my team's work, because what do? You can't dismiss that. Right. The other thing they did is they didn't put in upper cervical X-ray. So it's like all of a sudden upper cervical analysis, your nasium, your base posterior, your vertex, those don't exist, right? They just all of a sudden, poof, they're gone, right? Short leg x-ray, the AP pelvis for leg length inequality, which there's a ton of data out there on that says, hey, you know what, people with true anatomical short legs over a certain amount, they don't do very good, right? And so let's get rid of the AP pelvis and short leg, and then let's get rid of the whole full spine image, because there's too much evidence on that, on the full spine, right?
It's almost like they looked at what had evidence and to try to find out, okay, well, how can we get rid of this?
That's the way I think. Here's the thing: we're on, we get to say what we want. These are our opinions,
right?
But that's the way I think. When I read this paper, I'm like, how do you throw out the entire published database of upper cervical work? And I've read, I don't know, I think 70% of it when I had to do the guidelines for the X-ray guidelines I did with the ICA and such. And there's a ton of data in upper cervical outcomes. And yeah, they might not be the most robust randomized trials, but there's some randomized trials, there's some non-randomized trials, there's case series, there's case studies. And how do you just with one fell swoop go, we found no data? Well, how you do that is you don't include it. Right. So you just, so they excluded key, X-ray views, and they excluded key papers by wordsmithing what they would include. Right.
And was it, so explain to me a little bit more about that paper. Was they put cervical, thoracic, and lumbar? Were those the only 3 terms that they actually were searching for?
Yeah, I can't remember honestly their exact search terms. I'd have to go back and look and see exactly what they did. But we went through, used their search terms, and then used other search terms that should have been used. And this is how we pulled all the papers that we pulled. We were like, hey man, you missed like 150 key papers. And then the best part is that, well, there's two main, like, oh my gosh, like black eyes. Like, number one, they included my colleagues and I, my paper. So my team and I, and when I say my team, I'm taking credit for all these people, but
the team,
Jeb McAvini and his colleagues at Sydney, Australia in 2004 and 2005 contacted me, and they had their master's project that they were doing for part of their master's in chiropractic at Macquarie University. And I got to be an academic advisor on the paper and helped them and did it up, took their data and formally, processed it and wrote it up, and we submitted it to JMPT in 2005. And we showed people with straight necks and kyphotic necks were 18 times more likely to have neck pain. And I mean, that's a huge odds ratio. That's not a tiny finding, right? And it's a really good paper. It's done at Macquarie University. And it's part of a master's thesis, Well, it made the Corso paper, but somehow they didn't discuss it, and it didn't change anything that they identified. It's like, how can you include that paper and then go, well, there's no evidence that X-ray analysis influences what people feel symptomatology wise. So that's black eye number one. Black eye number two is Cote under their own inclusion criteria. Cote published a paper that's very well known in spine in 1997 on X-ray line drawing reliability. And it shows that lateral cervical X-ray line drawing is reliable. But yet somehow that didn't make their own paper. And they're concluding that X-ray is not reliable and valid. Yet Cote authored a paper that said exactly the opposite of what their paper found. It's like, how do you not remember your own publication?
Well, or like, what changed to make him like to go to the other side? Like, what was?
I don't know. But to actually not even acknowledge your own paper, and then make a statement in 2020 that's entirely different than what your own paper proves you found in 1997. It's like, you got to omit that, right? You got to go, oh well, maybe he's just published so many papers he forgot that he wrote it.
Maybe.
I don't know. I mean,
Maybe.
I've published 200 and I know all of them.
You know all of them, yeah.
So
Yeah. All right.
anyway, I mean, these are the real obvious errors are just this, and they missed all the true anomalies and findings that we see that absolutely change what we do as a chiropractor. And you know this as an upper cervical doctor,
Yep.
you're seeing interesting anomalies that
Absolutely.
affect what it is that you're going to be doing.
Absolutely.
And some of those anomalies, you're like, whoa, that's actually interesting. Maybe their subluxation pattern matches their anomaly, right?
Absolutely. And that would obviously
And
change patient outcome as well. If you have some sort of asymmetry or anything that could change the intervention. And if you didn't have that and you just gave them standard care and then they didn't get the results and then they go on, no, chiropractic didn't work, let me go over here. I mean, it affects every single person that you could potentially do that for.
that's right. So, they missed many things. They missed the whole anomaly debate, the whole instability debate. Hey, if we see instability, number one, you can't find instability in the spine without imaging.
Right.
So how do you even know you have it?
Right.
And we all know as clinicians that the red flag only, oh, you know what, follow these protocols. You know how many things you miss?
Yeah.
I mean, we all have taken x-rays of people that you're like, oh my God, this is, I would never have guessed that this
Right.
was there.
Yeah.
You're going right now to the ER.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's like, you've got a leaky aneurysm and
Yeah.
you just have, back pain.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And,
Totally.
all these things that, are supposed to be red flags, but oftentimes you don't actually get them from the history
Right.
and the exam. You only see them on an image.
Right. Well,
Right.
and just the basic idea of, and you say it in your paper, you're going to introduce a thrust into the patient. You want to see what you're going to be thrusting into. Granted, the majority of the time, maybe it's okay, but on those patients that it's not okay, obviously we want to know about that. That affects malpractice. It affects that patient's individual life. It affects so much. And then to have that based on the whole, linear no threshold, et cetera, it's like the arguments just fall apart in every way.
Yep. And that's a huge thing that they claim that there's harm from x-ray.
Right.
And this is the linear no threshold model of cancer induction, right? And this claim is so wrong and so false. Yeah. And so oversimplified. And we've pointed this out time and time again. Yeah. In the literature. We started writing about the LNT model versus the hormesis model versus what we call a threshold model. Mm-hmm. Which is where there is a threshold of radiation exposure that will trigger cancer. Right. But the threshold is way higher than you would imagine and way right. higher than any imaging done right. in medical facilities and settings.
Chiropractic right. and medical. I mean,
that's right.
In medical settings, you're gonna have a lot higher radiation than a chiropractic setting ever would by a lot.
I mean, if this idea was correct, life wouldn't exist today because right. everybody that was imaged, we'd all be dead. We'd right. all, have died of cancer a long time ago. Yep. And so this debate, they've ignored the LNT model flaws. It's actually completely flawed.
Yeah, the beer 7 and all that stuff.
That's correct. And so we point this out and we're very, very well versed in it. And so are the reviewers at Dose Response. I mean, this is their life's work. You're talking right. about radiation, nuclear physicists, you're talking about toxicologists. These people are sharp at dose response. Right. And so they'll take our work and they look at it and they go, you guys misinterpreted this, or you forgot about this. And these reviewers just make our paper that much stronger when you see the outcome of it. Yeah. And at the end of the day, there is no harm by ascertaining an x-ray. And by taking a post x-ray, there's literally no harm. Right. And so the only thing that could happen would be benefit. Right. Yeah. Right. Because there's zero risk to taking an x-ray, zero. Yeah. Right. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. And then the big issue is, again, to me, the nail in the coffin is these randomized trials that they've ignored. It's like there's a few randomized trials on leg length inequality. When you look at, do we have a true leg length inequality, even under 10 millimeters? There's randomized trials that have taken people and put a lift in and then put no lift in a group. And then they follow them for 6 weeks to 3 months. Well, they find out that the group that got the lift to correct the leg length inequality, the true structural short leg, they do way better.
Yeah.
And you know this in upper cervical work, the same should go for, you know, functional leg length inequalities with imbalance to the spine, things like that. But the data on the X-ray with the randomized trials, they had to me, they had to ignore that data because there's no way to dismiss it if you include it.
Right. Do you think there's a possibility that they didn't, because a lot of these schools, I feel like maybe even Western states and some of these chiropractic schools, like they've never even heard of some of the upper cervical work and maybe even chiropractic biophysics and some of these things, because they're just taught manipulation, right? And then if you don't get a response within a reasonable amount of time, refer out. Do you think that there's a chance that they're just oblivious to the whole upper cervical world?
I think that used to be an acceptable excuse.
Yeah.
But in today's world, where we can search anything and identify what do the colleges teach.
Yeah.
I mean, I know there's differences from college to college, but you know what? You can quickly just do an academic educational itinerary review of the different colleges, and you'll see that upper cervical work is well taught at different colleges, and CBP work is taught at different colleges. And then, you know, personally, to put my personal twist on that, this is why I put the CBP publications all on a unique website, because I got tired of the academic community not being able to find them. I also got tired of the clinical community not being able to find them. So I put on about 10 years ago, I created chiropractic biophysics nonprofit.com or cbpnonprofit.com, and it lists all of our publications, and it lists them by study type, because I got tired of them going, oh, there's no randomized trials. Well, really, we've got 13 of them. Nice. And they're, you know, right listed at the top under randomized trials. And then it goes through, it lists them from, you know, earliest to latest, and then it puts their link in. So I wanted them to actually be able to click on the link and take them to PubMed or take them to where that study is indexed, right? And so I built all that. So now nobody can go, we weren't aware of it. Because if you are aware of who I am, and if you are aware of what CBP and just in general, then you should be able to find all my papers at a click of a button.
Right.
So, you know, and I get it, you don't include every one of them, but, you know, the example is the randomized trials that my colleagues and I have done, they're clearly showing that people that get improvement in the sagittal plane curves of the spine, those are the ones that have best short-term and, more importantly, long-term outcomes. Absolutely. And it's pain, disability, function, and neurophysiology. Yeah. And, you know, when there's 13 of them, how do you ignore that? Right. And it's based on X-ray, and it is. Both groups get an X-ray. One group gets standard care that's not X-ray based care, right? That's spinal manipulation and generalized generic care. Yeah. And then one group gets that same thing, but we also do the corrective care side of it. Right. And then we see what happens. Well, what happens is the group that gets corrective care, they do better. And that really is, to me, that's the end of the debate.
Yeah, it is. That is absolutely.
It shows that X-rays, A, change what a chiropractor does. Yep. And B, when you correct what it is you're trying to correct, verifiably, people do better at long term. Yeah. And instead of celebrating that, they're somehow dismissing and denying and discrediting it. And I really don't understand why. I really don't.
Yeah, I don't either. Like you said, money, powers, who knows, whatever's going on behind the scenes, it doesn't make sense. Or they just actually believe that they're doing some good, or they're, what is it, moral signaling, or whatever that new term is.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's it. And, you know, here's the problem. there's always the one bad apple in the barrel, right? But that's everywhere. There's in every profession, every industry, I don't care what it is,
Yeah.
there's a bad egg, right?
Yeah.
You can't use that to say, oh, well, in this case, they'll actually put this in writing. The reason this is in writing in JMPT, the reason chiropractors take x-rays is for financial incentives. And you're like, when's the last time we made money on an x-ray?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think I'm still paying off my x-ray machine.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, Doc. So do you think there's, to be fair, as much as we can, does the Corso paper actually have any legitimate points or arguments that stand up to science?
No, in my personal opinion, the Corso paper was so poorly done from an academic perspective on an area of healthcare that is well known and well versed. What they did is that they designed this study to make what I would call a preconceived conclusion. That's my personal opinion on it. Can I prove that? Well, that's not up to me to prove or disprove my opinion. We put it in writing so everybody can see it.
Right.
So if you read those two papers and then you read the letters to the editor that occurred, because Corso et al. Wrote a letter to the editor on our paper in dose response, and then we wrote a rebuttal to their letter. So there's really 4 articles that go together. It's the original Corso paper,
Right.
in chiropractic manual therapies.
Yep.
And then our dose response paper that critiqued the Canadian board and the Corso paper. Those are the 2 main papers. And then there's 2 letters to the editor that go along with that.
Where can I find those, Doc? Do you have those on your site?
Yeah, they're in dose response too.
Oh, okay.
So you can see the letters to the editor in dose response in the exchange. Okay. I believe they came out in November or December of 2021. So just a couple months ago.
Got it. I'd like to see what they said in response to you, in response to the second.
Well, I'll summarize it. The main response is they said that we just attacked their character, is what they said. They said we were guilty of ad hominem attacks, and which we kind of, to their credit, we were in a subtle way.
Yeah. Because
we accused them of really having an academic agenda. Right. Because they did. Right. We took Corso, the lead author, in 2016. We took a social media post of hers. Yep. Yep. And it's clear. It's clear. She says, I'm anti-imaging. There's no evidence whatsoever. Yeah. Well, you're not supposed to do a systematic literature review if that's your view on the topic already. Right. So we said that she has bias. Yeah. And because we said that, and because we brought up the funding issue, we were then attacked for the ad hominem. But in response to that, we said, well, the ad hominem is only inappropriate if there was no ethical concern, and if there was no agenda. Right. But we showed there was. So I mean, we argued simply in 1 or 2 sentences. We said, well, we think it's true, but let's just get over that. They didn't even respond to any of the things that we brought forth. Right. Their letter to the editor, if you read our paper and then their letter to the editor, they didn't bring up any of the things that we brought up. So they ignored it because the only one that they could actually hang their hat on was the ad hominem. Yeah. Right. I mean, that's a very common strategy of anyone trying to win an argument for just to be right or for whatever their reasons are, instead of actually addressing the points from each side. It's crazy to see how much that actually happens, how people just ignore valid points from the other side and say, well, blah, 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 instead of actually addressing the fact that they had a letter to the editor that didn't address any of that speaks volumes into to
the scientific merit of your paper.
Yeah, they just basically they accused us of scientific character attacks,
Yeah.
which we really didn't. If you read our main, review and dose response, it's a hardcore critical assessment,
Right.
but we point out the flaws and why.
Right. Right.
And my point is, hey, you can call me short and bald and little chubby and white, because I am.
Right.
I mean, to me, those aren't character attacks. That's
Right.
just
It's
what I
the
am,
fact.
right?
It's just, it is.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. All right,
Not
Doc.
that we called them short, fat, chubby, and anything. We didn't call them that, but right.
All right. Any other points to wrap this up, just or information or anything for anyone watching this to know? Do you want to spread any sort of information or knowledge besides everything we've gone through?
I would just say at the end, this debate's not over. Mark my words, in a year or two, you'll see another paper come out by academics again. We'll respond to it again. But I think chiropractors, you have to get involved,
Yeah.
whether it's within your own organization. I think we need to get involved at the state association levels, and then
Totally.
if possible, then the national association levels. You need to support the organizations that you have the same core values and beliefs with, and that you think are doing the right thing to change the profession.
Right.
Too many times clinicians ignore the academic world and ignore the political world, and that's where we get in trouble, because a lot of times academics and the political side, they don't actually see what the clinician sees.
Right.
So
Totally.
I think the clinicians need to get more involved, even if it's just supporting financially, but certainly getting involved in the state and the national organizations, and supporting groups that are doing the right thing. Like, my group, selfishly, I would say, hey, even if you're not a chiropractic biophysics doctor, why not donate to
Absolutely.
us every
That
year,
was
even $100,
that was my next
$200?
question. That was my next question on how we can support you. Because I mean, even as an upper cervical chiropractor, and I don't do, chiropractic biophysics, we're still brothers in the sense of we want the same thing for chiropractic. So, can you tell us what the sites are, where the locations are again to support, you and the research and all that?
Yeah, two of them. Really, the research one is cbpnonprofit.com. And you'll see, links for PayPal if you're into that, or, whatever you want to do to support us. I'd love support.
Okay.
We truly have a nonprofit organization, and all the money goes into research. Like, people don't understand that chiropractors on the board, like, I donate money. I don't take money. I don't get paid for any of the research I do. I get paid indirectly from, teaching and things like that.
Right.
But the actual research, I'm paying to do it. And we take member dues, and we pay for the, whatever we need for the study,
Right.
equipment or funding, statisticians or whatever it is. So cbpnonprofit.com.
Okay.
That's our research organization, and you can see all the papers that we've done there. And then if you want any information on CBP itself, it's idealspine.com.
Cool. And I'll link those in the description below, and make sure that's accessible and for anyone watching.
Yep. I appreciate that.
Yeah, Doc, I can't thank you enough. It was I was so excited. You just answered my request to come on. I was like, yes, we're going to get this amazing chiropractor and researcher on the show here to keep spreading the knowledge. So it was an honor to have you, and thank you again so much for all the time and energy you've put into the profession to keep it true and what it was founded to be, and all of that. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Hey, thank you, Kevin. And again, I just want to say thanks to you and all the listeners out there, but I want to say thanks to my research team, all the colleagues that I work with. Again, I get to be the spearhead, but I've got people that are just pushing me and pulling me, and And it is truly an entire team of people that I work with, whether it's overseas or in the United States.
Awesome. Great. Great. All right, Doc. Thank you so much. And maybe we'll have you on again in the future. Who knows?
Thanks, Kevin.
All right.
Appreciate it, man.
Thank you.
Hey, that's it for this episode. So what did you learn that fascinated you or surprised you about the research today? Join or start the conversation in the comments below. Hey, thanks so much for watching. To watch more of our research shows, click or tap the screen right there. To subscribe to the channel, click or tap the screen right there. Until next time, I'm Dr. Kevin Leach with the Upper Cervical Chiropractic Research Show, bringing awareness to conservative primary spine care, upper cervical chiropractic care, and traditional chiropractic. Until next time, take care and take care of your spine. It's the only one you'll ever have.